I know you just got back from a trip to Qatar, Iraq, and Turkey, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
But first, there are a lot of questions about the Republican Party and where it goes from here. And first and foremost, there's this claim from the Trump campaign that advisors of yours have been pitching you hard to the Trump campaign to be his running mate, that you really want the job, according to these Trump campaign officials talking about these advisors. What's your position on that?
Well, it would be impossible because I don't really have very many advisors around. Our campaign is no longer running, and unless they've been talking to my wife, which is my critical advisor these days.
Does she want you to be Mr. Trump?
Like I said yesterday, look, I think Donald has won. He's the presumptive nominee at this point, and but he'd be best served by having someone, not just by the way a vice presidential nominee, but active surrogates who agree with him on his issues. My differences with Donald, both my reservations about his campaign and my policy differences with him, are well documented, and they remain. And I think he would be best served by having people close to him in his campaign that are enthusiastic about the things he stands for.
You have raised concerns throughout the campaign, ones that you're standing by, about his temperament and about his views on foreign policy, on trade policy, and other things. Would those reservations keep you? Do they right now preclude you from endorsing him?
Well, I've signed a pledge that said I'd support the Republican nominee, and I intend to continue to do that. But look, here's a situation that we're in. On the one hand, I don't want Hillary Clinton to be the president of the United States. I don't want her to win this election. On the other hand, as I said, I have well-defined differences with the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. And like millions of Republicans who try to reconcile those two things, I intend to live up to the pledge that we made. But that said, these concerns that I have about policy, they remain and they're there. But, you know, that doesn't mean that Donald needs to change his positions in order to get my support or what have you. As I said earlier today, I think he should be true to what he believes in and continue to campaign on those things and make his case to the American people.
But it's not just concerns that you've had about him. You once said that you didn't think it was, that you had concerns about the fact, about the nuclear codes being in the hands of an erratic con man. That was what you said.
Well, so I'm not going to, here's what I'm not going to do over the next 6 months is sit there and just be taking shots at him. He obviously wasn't my first choice because I was running for president. He has won the nomination. And now he deserves the opportunity to go out and make his case to the American people. And that's what he's going to do. I don't view my role over the next 6 months to just sit here and level charges against him. I know what I said during the campaign. I enunciated those things repeatedly, and the voters chose a different direction. I stand by the things that I said, but I'm not going to sit here now and become his chief critic over the next 6 months because he deserves the opportunity to go forward and make his argument and try to win.
But do you understand why millions of people who voted for you and who still see you as the future of the Republican Party wonder, well, if you're standing by saying that you have concern about putting the nuclear codes in the hands of an erratic con man, how do you reconcile that with...
Well, we ultimately live in a republic, and so in a republic, these voters went out and voted. And through the process set up by the Republican Party, he became our nominee. That's just a fact. He is now the presumptive nominee. That said, it doesn't change what I've said in the past. I stand by those things. And, but now he is the presumptive nominee. I don't want Hillary Clinton to win. And I just don't view now the most productive role for me is to be sitting here and be someone that's taking shots at him every day.
Do you want either one of them to win?
Well, I don't want Hillary Clinton to win, and as I've said, I want to be supportive of the Republican nominee. I signed a pledge that I would do so. And I think one of the best ways that I can be supportive of the conservative cause is to go out there and work on behalf of those who, for example, are running to hold the Republican majority in the United States Senate, or candidates across the country that share my views on national security and on some of these other issues. And that's where I intend to focus my time.
Do you worry about your colleagues like Rob Portman in Ohio or Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania? Toomey endorsed you. Individuals who are in blue to purple states, Republicans, and there are a lot of Republicans who think that Donald Trump might be a drag on the ticket.
Well, those were going to be tough races irrespective of whoever the nominee was. Those are difficult states to begin with, and we haven't won those in presidential races in the past either. So I think you just enunciated in two people, Portman and Toomey, two of our strongest senators, two of our strongest candidates. And so I think irrespective of what happens at the top of the ticket, these are two folks that can be reelected on their own merits.
But focusing on them might be a better service for you to the party, getting them reelected, than campaigning for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that's where I can be of most use. As I said, I think Donald would be best served by having people out there campaigning on his behalf as surrogates, as his running mate, who are more fully embrace some of the things he stood for.
I interviewed Speaker Ryan Thursday, as you probably saw, and he said he couldn't endorse Donald Trump right now. Is that what you're saying, or no, that's not
well,
what you're...
the difference between Speaker Ryan and myself is I ran for president. I signed a pledge, put my name on it, and I said I would support the Republican nominee. And that's what I intend to do. And I think, but the best thing I can do to do that, I think, is to support those who are out there running for the conservative cause, whether it's to keep a conservative majority in the Senate or in the House, for that matter, and across the country at different levels. And what I don't want to do, and what I'm not going to do, is sit here for the next 6 months and, as I said, take shots at the Republican nominee. I ultimately believe he has earned, and I respect the will of the voters, and I believe he's earned the opportunity to go out and make his case to the American people without having people in his own party taking shots at him every day.
I understand that, but it does seem like you're trying to kind of walk this.
Well, it's a very unique situation, and I understand, you know, it's
Are you
not like
vote
any other campaign. Well, as I said, I'm going to support the Republican nominee.
No, you're going to abide by your pledge, but are you, when you go into the privacy of the voting booth, are you going to pull the trigger?
Well, I intend to support the Republican nominee, and I think that, you know, includes the entire process.
Including.
Well, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
I'm not throwing away my vote.